Guess who's getting married this week? Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. If you like all things true crime, supernatural, UFO, conspiracy theory and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you each week with our true crime killer weekends and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. I will leave a small disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It does involve details of violent crime, so if that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. And remember, if you've nothing nice to say,
shut up.
Now, boys and ghouls, I'm sure you are eager to get into this week's episode, but before we get started, let me introduce you to our amazing sponsor. It's Temu. Spooky season is officially here.
Halloween's upon us.
And to celebrate not only All Hallows Eve, but their very own special 1-year anniversary, the incredible team over at Temu have asked me to select my top fashion picks just for you. With trends changing so often these days, I'm always left feeling a wee bit late to the party. If only there was a way for us to see what our favourite celebrities were putting in their shopping carts. Well, with Temu's first ever curated shopping list, you can finally know what influencers such as Laura Lee, Jason Derulo and Do It On A Dime are going for this fall. With this exclusive new feature, Temu allows you guys an insight so that you can beat the queues and be the first to grab those seasonal must-haves. Since opening their online store and establishing the Temu app, which by the way is currently the #1 free app on the App Store, Temu has continued to grow by providing each consumer with deep discounts and the freedom to express themselves through fashion. Before discovering the Temu app, I found it so frustrating trying to source alternative spooky girl clothing that didn't carry a price tag that would stop my heart. Shop like a millionaire on Temu and discover hidden gems like this super cute Halloween inspired cardigan and this gorgeous sporty two-piece. P.S. Not to overshare or anything, but for my fellow busty ladies, this little crop top and its supportive lining has been a game changer, and I'll definitely be taking her out for a spin at the local gym. Going on a hot date this October? Then check out this gorgeous embellished crop top, and of course I had to team it with a beautiful wee silk midi skirt in my signature colour, obviously.
It looks like you're going to a funeral.
Also, how amazing are these snazzy ghost face earrings? Because nothing says she's a keeper like a fictional serial killer dangling from her lobes. Even if you're just looking for some comfy cozies to lounge around the house in, Temu has you covered. Literally. To stay nice and toasty, I grabbed this adorable, spooky yet sassy pink ghostly sweatshirt, perfect for a rainy Wednesday night in. Now, it's no secret that Temu offers the best sales, but to celebrate their first anniversary, they've decided to kick it up a notch. During this special anniversary sale month, they have thousands of items available to you at the low price of only $1.
I'm sorry, I just hallucinated.
Nope, you aren't having delusions, you heard me right. For 1 month only, new app users can search through Temu's $1 gems to find that perfect bargain buy. But you know my friends over at Temu, they wanted to give you more. More I said, and they said more. If you download the Temu app right now using the link in the description and search the code DKB2558, you will get 50% off within 1 hour of downloading. Yep, I know, it's cuckoo, it's wild.
It's madness, I tell you, for the love of God!
So go now before my beautiful friends over at Temu change their minds. Download the Temu app through the link in the description and search code DKB2558 to get 50% off within 1 hour of downloading the Temu app. A massive thank you to Temu for sponsoring this video, and remember, 'tis the season to be slaying. She's back! I swear I have not gone insane, and this get-up will make sense in about 5 seconds. As you may all know, I'm getting married this month, and all the stressful parts aside, I'm pretty excited about it. It's been really fun organising the food, the beautiful flowers, the alcohol, but I think most of you will agree when it comes to planning the traditional style nuptials, it's all about the dress. I was never that girl who dreamt of getting married, but I always knew what I wanted from my gown on the big day. I actually used to work in a bridal shop as a stylist, and the one thing I would tell all of my brides is that the right man is like the right dress. When you know, you know. And can I just say that working in the wedding industry is not for the faint of heart. I mean, the horror stories that I could tell you. So does it take a certain je ne sais quoi to be able to communicate with brides day in and day out? Yes, it does. And that's a quality that the two women in tonight's story both shared. For the most part, it's a lovely job which can be extremely rewarding at times. And really, the only thing you need to worry about is the odd bridezilla having a tantrum. Or is it? Like most retail stores, the bridal industry is mainly populated by female employees, with women making up over 65% of the public sector workforce. And whilst working alongside a group of your girls can totally be fun, it also has its drawbacks. Cattiness and power struggles aside, every day retailers are targeted by thugs, vandals, and predators, all because of their gender. Statistically, criminals are more likely to target establishments who have an all-female workforce, as it minimises the threat of being physically overpowered. This is something that, tragically, the employees of the King Way hair salon in South Seattle know all too well. On October 17, 2021, it was business as usual in the busy salon. COVID had hit salon owner Jenny Wen hard financially, and she and her staff were glad to just get back to some sort of normalcy. As clients sat having their roots touched up and their scalps deep conditioned, 3 men wearing the infamous ghost face mask from the 1996 cult classic Scream appeared outside the beauty parlour. As it was close to Halloween, Jenny didn't panic right away, but her confusion soon turned to bone-chilling fear when all 3 of the assailants entered her shop, and one drew a pistol. Luckily, no one was harmed during the robbery, in which hundreds of dollars were stolen and everyone's car keys were taken, but this isn't the first time something like this has happened, and I'm 100% certain it won't be the last. In March 1994, 2 gunmen terrorised the staff and customers of the Vera Wang Bridal House within the Carlisle Hotel. The pair entered the store without incident, initially claiming they were looking for a gown for one of their daughters. Both were dressed smartly and appeared to fit into their Upper East Side surroundings. However, according to receptionist Ava Camberage, something seemed off, so she declined access to the second floor bougie boutique. At this time, Edith and Gerald Schaefer were enjoying a very special day. Their daughter Elisa had recently gotten engaged and was trying on a wedding gown in the fitting room upstairs. A wealthy and hard-working family, they'd spent their morning in New York City shopping at Bergdorf's and brunching at Barney's with their 2 daughters, all before heading to the Vera Wang showroom for their 1:30 appointment. Unbeknownst to the couple, whilst Elisa tried on designer dresses, the two men downstairs were refusing to take no for an answer. One, later identified as Randy Caggiano, pulled a gun on Eva and the store manager, Brenda Babcock, until they led both he and his accomplice upstairs, where they then ran in to Gerald Schaefer. In a struggle for his wallet, Gerald was shot, and the duo then moved on to his wife Edith, demanding that she remove her wedding and engagement rings. On this particular day, her fingers were quite swollen, and as Randy tried to rip her jewellery over her knuckle, he shot her in the ribs. Bride-to-be Elisa and her sister Jennifer were left alone in the store, cradling their parents as they bled out on the white carpet. This particular tale fortunately had a happy ending, if we can even call it that, because both of the victims survived their attacks. And as for the gunmen, Randy Caggiano and Sandor Sebok, they were eventually tracked down and charged with robbery and attempted murder. Unfortunately, the two bridal shop employees in this week's case suffered a worse fate, and their deaths would only be the beginning of a sadistic and disturbing murder spree that would haunt those working and living along the I-70 freeway. Tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the tragic murders of Patricia Smith and Patricia Majors. Till death do us part. The spring of 1992 was, by all accounts, a pretty hectic season for business owner Patricia Majors. This time between late April and early September, also known as wedding season, often went by in a blur of ivory satin and tulle. As you can imagine, the 11th of April was no exception, as Majors and her 23-year-old co-worker Patricia Smith prepared for a long day at the bridal showroom, named La Bride d'Elegance.
Nestlé Toulouse.
They were staying behind a wee bit later that afternoon because a groom was coming by to pick up his cummerbund for his upcoming wedding. Most of their customers for the day had already been and gone, so the women were just killing time until they could lock up and head home. They were completely oblivious to the horror that would befall them as their shift came to an end that night. Just after 6 p.m. that evening, the late customer arrived at the store situated at 41613 East Kellogg Drive in Wichita, Kansas, to pick up his waistband for his tuxedo. But he noted through the polished glass window that the place appeared dimly lit and deserted. When he casually walked through the open front door, he was stopped, as there, standing just a few feet away from him, was a man carrying an Uzi-style gun. The gunman pointed the gun, covered by a bridal veil, in his direction and instructed him to move towards the office at the back of the store. The shopper hesitated and told the assailant that if he let him go, he would never tell a soul what he'd seen. Miraculously, after just a few seconds of deliberation, he set him free. Quietly shuffling towards the door, he never turned his back on the stranger. His life was saved in that moment because laying in the small back room were the deceased bodies of Patricia Majors and Patricia Smith. Patricia Ann Trendle Smith was born on September 15th, 1968 in Wichita, Kansas, to her parents Robert and Evelyn Fay. Patricia and her brother William were raised in the city, known for its success in the aeronautical industry, by their father, a former member of the United States Air Force, and their mother, a retailer who worked in a local shop named Lancelot's, which specialised in knickknacks snacks and home decor items. The children had a happy upbringing, and Patricia was a popular girl with a close, tight-knit circle of friends. When speaking to 12 News Online in 2019, close pal Ruth Feather stated she just had that way about her and people loved her. After finishing high school, she went on to study nursing at Wichita State University. She adored kids and it was her dream to work in pediatric care. At the young age of 22, in the summer of 1991, she was married to hometown sweetheart Norman Smith. As the smitten couple posed for their wedding photographs, they envisioned a life together as man and wife. They could never have known that their marital bliss would come to a violent end only 9 months later. During a segment with CBS 19 News, Norman described his bride as the most beautiful soul you'd ever want to meet. While she was a student at Wichita Uni, Patricia looked for a part-time job, something short-term to help keep up with the household bills, etc. That's when she heard that a new store just off of the I-35 was looking for staff. Her dad, Robert, wasn't too thrilled about his baby girl working so close to a major highway, as in his experience, those areas seemed to be easy pickings for criminals and drifters up to no good. But Patricia was an adult and now a married woman, and once she'd made her mind up about something, it was hard to dissuade her. So Robert put his doubts aside and supported his daughter when she was offered a sales position within the La Bride d'Elegance shop under the management of 32-year-old Patricia Majors. Patricia Lynn Stood Majors was born on June 18th, 1959 in Wichita, Kansas, to her parents Alfred and Dorothy Jean Stood. Much like that of Patricia Smith, Majors was blessed with a brother and his name was Bob. Patricia, given the nickname Trish by those who knew her, was raised alongside Bob by their mother, an intensive care nurse, and their father, a geologist and former World War II Marine veteran. Sadly, she was just 7 years old when her parents decided to call it quits and split up. Her dad went on to promptly remarry in 1968. His new wife, Virginia Ruggles, was a single mum to an 8-year-old daughter of her own. The union caused a lot of friction within the family, and throughout her late teens, Majors didn't have a lot of contact with her estranged father. In fact, when she tied the knot to boyfriend Mark Sean Majors in the early 1980s, her biological father would not be the one to walk her down the aisle. Instead, Patricia chose a close family friend to give her away. This man, who served as a father figure to the pretty brunette, worked as a pathologist at the time. In some cruel twist of fate, his darling Patricia would wind up on his autopsy table just a few short years later. Mark Majors later told KAKE News that his wife was just one of those people that had the personality that people enjoyed being around. He said that they had the textbook marriage and that they were described as two peas in a pod by family and friends. At the start of 1991, Mark and Patricia were looking to take on a new business project, and after a few years of saving, they were finally able to purchase their own store. Majors had a passion for fashion retailing and felt like a career within the wedding industry was the right fit for her at that time. So, in the February of that year, the pair bought the property, which was known as 41613 East Kellogg Drive, and took ownership of the small shop situated next door. They renamed the stores La Bride d'Elegance and Sir Knight Tuxedo and Formal Wear, specialising in both wedding gowns and men's occasion wear. Although they had invested in the businesses 50-50, Mark would later admit that the boutiques were more his wife's thing. She took great pride in renovating the units and was amazing with customers from the moment they opened their doors. The store was so busy, in fact, that the couple were forced to take on more staff. Enter bubbly nursing student Patricia Smith. Over the next few months, Majors trained Smith up, and pretty soon she was a force to be reckoned with on the shop floor. Clients would rave about both women's customer service skills, but sadly on the 11th of April 1992, their warm and inviting natures would put them directly in harm's way. The ladies would normally lock up at around 6 p.m, but they'd just received a frantic call from a desperate groom in need of a cummerbund. He said he was currently at work and with rush hour traffic, he wouldn't be able to make it there in time for closing. So could they please just stay open a couple of minutes later and he would get there ASAP. In that typical service with a smile attitude, both Majors and Smith agreed to stay behind, figuring they'd get some extra cleaning done whilst waiting for this gentleman to arrive. It is believed by law enforcement that sometime just after 6 p.m, a man walked up to the window of La Bride d'Elegance and knocked. It is unknown as to who let him inside. It's assumed that whoever did so under the impression that this was the late night customer coming to pick up his tuxedo waistband, when in reality, they had just welcomed a killer into their little store. Without much struggle, both Smith and Majors were led into a small office space at the back of the bridal shop. Their murderer probably told them that he was just there for the money, and if they complied, he would leave them unharmed. He lied. During what was, I'm sure, a terrifying 5 to 10 minute ordeal, the intruder took aim with a .22 caliber pistol, and in broad daylight, he shot both women in the back of the head, hitting Patricia Majors twice and Patricia Smith once. Meanwhile, in the home he shared with his wife, Mark Majors was preparing dinner, waiting for Patricia to come home. Meanwhile, in the home that he shared with his wife, Mark Majors was preparing dinner, waiting for Patricia to come home. He looked forward to seeing her bounding through the front door like she always did. He was totally unaware that he would never see that image ever again. Mark had tried to get in touch with his wife when she was late in coming back, and the meal on the table had started to turn cold, but there was no answer at the store. After an hour had passed, he decided to take it upon himself to drive down there. Meanwhile, newlywed Norman Smith was also waiting on the arrival of his missus. He expected her back from work at around 6:15 p.m. So when she didn't show up, he too called the bridal shop, but the phone just rang out. He wasn't majorly concerned at this point because Patricia would frequently stay behind to help out with stock or a pesky late night shopper. Of course, if you ever worked in retail, you get it. In my 12 years of sales experience, I could literally count on one hand the amount of times I actually got out on time. Because, and small rant incoming, there's always that one motherfucker who comes in 5 minutes to closing and needs just 1 more minute to decide.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
However, when he still hadn't heard anything by 7 p.m, Norman once again picked up the phone. No answer. This was weird, and Mark Majors thought so too. Both men got in their cars and arrived at the scene shortly after 7:30, only to find the small strip mall crawling with cops and littered with crime scene tape. Law enforcement had been summoned to the La Bride d'Elegance shop due to a frantic 911 call placed just 20 minutes earlier. The eyewitness who'd visited the store earlier that evening to pick up his cummerbund had waited a whole hour before alerting authorities because of his fear of retaliation. He worried the gunman he'd met that night would come looking for him. After all, he'd seen his face and could provide investigators with a detailed description. When first responders arrived on scene, they found Patricia Smith and Patricia Majors laying face down in the back room. Majors was dead on arrival, but Smith was still clinging to life. Smith's family and loved ones prayed she would pull through, perhaps even be able to shed some light on what nightmare had transpired. But all their hopes were dashed when Patricia Smith was pronounced dead just after arriving at the hospital. The women's loved ones were absolutely shocked and devastated. This made no sense at all, and the scene only contributed to those feelings of confusion. A little bit of money was taken from the store, and some of the girls' personal effects were stolen too, but cash laying around in plain sight was left untouched. This minute detail led law enforcement to believe that whoever did this wanted police to believe it was nothing but a simple robbery, when in fact the motive was probably far more personal. Both Mark Majors and Norman Smith were looked at for the execution-style killings, but neither man could be tied to the scene, and it was pretty obvious that they were just as destroyed by the events as anyone else. The late-night customer and sole witness to the crime has always remained nameless in the media, most likely for his own safety. He was able to provide detectives with enough information so that they could have a composite sketch drawn up. The witness also claimed that the killer appeared to be in some sort of trance-like state and was carrying what he thought was an Uzi-style machine gun. The images of this mystery killer were distributed throughout several local news stations, and pretty soon everyone was looking over their shoulder for this guy, especially those who were working in the retail sector. You see, what I didn't mention is that the case of Majors and Smith wasn't the first of its kind in the Midwest. In fact, only 3 days prior, another young brunette had lost her life in a very similar fashion. Indianapolis local 26-year-old Robin Sarah Fuldauer was working an afternoon shift at the Payless shoe source. The Indiana University graduate wasn't supposed to work that day, but after a colleague called in sick, she was asked to come in. To those who knew her, it came as no surprise that Robin had offered to cover her friend's shift that day. She was a kind and caring young woman who wasn't afraid of a bit of hard work. After her lunch break, Robin got back on the floor, cleaning fixtures and rearranging stock whilst it was quiet. As she carried out these tasks, her killer circled the building, pacing outside the shop, deciding when he was going to strike. Jeff Mayrose, an employee at the MEB paint store across the street, watched as a man wearing a green jacket, dark slacks and black shoes nervously canvassed the area in front of the Payless branch. According to Jeff, the man was noticeably mentally ill as he began chatting and giggling to himself. This encounter was creepy enough that it stuck in Jeff's mind. Another detail that struck him as odd was the abnormally large and long sports bag the stranger had strapped over his shoulder. He kept digging through it with his head on a constant swivel every time he did. At some point between 1:30 and 2 p.m, the weird man entered the Payless store and he pulled a .22 caliber handgun out of his bag and pointed it at Robin Fuldauer. She was then led into a stockroom where the attacker shot her once in the back of the head. Robin's body was uncovered by police at 2:20 p.m. after she failed to answer several calls from the store's owner. Much like that in the Wichita case, a measly $90 was taken from the till, proving once again that the motive behind this crime was most likely not financial. Jeff Mayrose, who witnessed the killer acting suspiciously outside the shop, provided police with a detailed description. He also said he saw the same guy trying to hitch a ride north towards the I-465 after the murder. In the days that followed the brutal Wichita executions, it would end up being ballistics evidence that would connect the two crime scenes to one another. Spent shell casings found at both stores had a distinct residue on them known as jeweler's rouge. This is often used in the jewellery trade. It's a finely ground compound created with the purpose of polishing scratches out of gold and silver. Now you might be wondering why this would be found on shell casings. Well, according to the Washington hunting forums, some use jeweler's rouge as a quick and cost-effective way of cleaning their gun barrels. Forensic experts also determined that the assailant had fashioned the pistol with a wood forestock and an 11.75-inch barrel, giving the weapon a more unique appearance. Images were released of the two weapons thought to be owned by the murderer, including the Intratec 22 Scorpion, mistaken for an Uzi submachine gun by the late-night customer at La Bride d'Elegance on April 11th. Despite two detailed descriptions of the killer and the firearms used in his crimes, the trail went cold, and it was as if this monster had just vanished into thin air. One thing that continues to baffle investigators is the fact that there appears to be no clear motive in either crime. There was no sign of sexual assault, and even though some money was taken, this was later proven to be a red herring, something the shooter did to throw investigators off his scent. A factor that was quite bizarre was the physical similarities between all three victims. They were young, slim white women aged between 20 and 30 with dark brown hair. Was it possible this guy had a preferred victim type? Was he driven by rage or childhood trauma, and would he be able to stop himself from hurting another innocent female? Only 16 days after Smith and Majors were shot dead, the man who would soon be nicknamed the I-70 killer by the media would strike again, and his next move would leave police scratching their heads. The morning of April 27th was mostly uneventful for 40-year-old Michael McCowan. He had an appointment with the local chiropractor, and afterwards he was feeling a little bit stiff. So for a second, he even considered staying home that day. The store, which Sylvia founded in 1969, was her greatest achievement, aside from her three beautiful children, Michael, Teresa, and Cindy. Such is the case in most family businesses. Sylvia and her husband Philip expected the kids to help out every once in a while, and even though it wasn't exactly Michael's thing, he obliged. You see, Michael isn't exactly the typical guy you would expect to work in an elegant ceramic shop. He was a rocker at heart and was even known to wear his long dark locks in a low ponytail. Although he was more than willing to pitch in when needed, his true love was always music. A gifted harmonist, Michael would play in many bands throughout his 20s and early 30s. Here you can see him pictured with his rock band Chaser, who were active from around 1977 to 1981. Despite his ambitious career goals, Michael was a loyal son. Unfortunately, that loyalty and dedication to the McCowan family business would cost him his life when, once again, the I-70 killer returned to Indiana. Sylvia's Ceramics was a pretty little shop situated just an hour and 20 minutes from where Robin Fildower was murdered at 2615 South 3rd Street in Terre Haute. Despite his bad back, Michael McCowan went into work that day. He spent the afternoon pottering around, placing new pieces on the shelves and polishing ornaments. At approximately 4 p.m, he bent down to pick something up, turning his back to the main entrance. His killer slowly and quietly snuck inside, gun at the ready. Within seconds, he was gone, and Michael would later be found dead on the shop floor. The scene was all too familiar, spent shell casings with that unmistakable dark rose red tinge, and little to no cash taken from the premises. However, despite their feelings of deja vu, law enforcement couldn't ignore the one big difference between this case and the previous two. Michael was a man. Ballistic experts have confirmed that the same firearm was used in all three attacks. So why did the shooter's victim profile suddenly take a very masculine turn? Well, according to profilers, this is very out of character for serial murderers. They often act out certain fantasies of revenge or retaliation by targeting victims who resemble the object of their rage, or in some cases, unrequited affections. From a psychology standpoint, this makes absolutely no sense, and for that reason, police believe that the I-70 killer may have made a fatal error when canvassing Highway 41 for his victims. Remember we discussed Michael McCowan's appearance, rocker vibes with that long dark hair? Well, he also liked his jewellery and was known to wear a long dangly earring in his left ear. Investigators surmised that the shooter probably saw the name Sylvia on the outside of the shop and mistook Michael for a woman when peering in through the glass window. It is possible that upon entry he realised that his target was in fact male. This would explain why he never made an attempt to lure Michael to the back of the store, as he'd done in both of his previous crimes. Michael was a lofty 6'4". If someone had tried to aggressively approach him, he would have most definitely fought back. Perhaps this is why the gunman decided to take him out then and there, despite the high risk of a shopper passing by and seeing something. Teresa Lee, Michael's sister, disagrees with this theory, however, stating, "My God, he was 6'4". He didn't have the body of a woman. He was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time." Was she right? Was the infamous serial killer changing his victim profile just because? Obviously nobody can say for sure, but I think it's important to mention that this would be the first and final time that he would ever stray from his usual type. But that doesn't mean he was ready to stop. No, because only 6 days later, on May 3rd, he was once again prowling for a petite brunette working all alone. Nancy Christine Kitzmiller, much like Robin Fuldower, wasn't even supposed to be working on the day she died. She'd kindly offered to cover a co-worker's shift, putting her own plans on hold to help them out. The 24-year-old, who was originally from Oklahoma, opened the Boot Village store just before 12 p.m. It was a Sunday, so the shops in the Bogey Hills Plaza shopping centre were allowed to open a little bit later. Although she was working by herself that afternoon, Nancy had always felt safe in the shop. She was sandwiched between a hairdresser and a veterinary clinic and based within a popular local mall. Of late, however, things had changed for the recent Oklahoma State graduate. 1 month prior to her death, the plaza, which sat just off of I-70, had been the scene of a terrifying robbery. In the middle of the day, a gunman had entered the nearby Hallmark gift shop and had forced 2 employees into a back room. After spraying both staff members in the face with mace, the assailant raided the till and stole $200 before fleeing the scene. Police uncovered little to no clues as to who this guy was, and the whole ordeal left retailers pretty shaken up. Nancy, although shocked by the recent robbery, wasn't too nervous about working alone. She'd just been offered a position as a cartographer within the Defense Mapping Agency in St. Louis, Missouri, so she wouldn't be employed at Boot Village for much longer. The past few weeks had been exciting for the recent graduate. She just purchased a brand new Chevy pickup truck and was happy to be putting her geography degree to good use. According to family and friends, Nancy was always an overachiever. Whilst attending Fort Zumwalt High School, she was a soccer star and even went on to captain the team at Oklahoma State. Like a lot of little girls who grew up in this area, she grew up idolizing country and western singers such as Dolly Parton and attending state fairs with her family. As a teen, Nancy found a deep love for horses and would frequent the local rodeo on the weekends. Now, you can't get much more country than that. A fan of cowboy hats and, of course, rhinestones, she was a talented line dancer who loved her family dearly. Prior to her death, the Kitzmillers had enjoyed a lavish trip to Paris, something that Nancy could not stop talking about. Much like the other victims in the I-70 case, she was starting an exciting new chapter in her life, and she could never have predicted that evil was coming her way, and fast. Just after 12:30 p.m, a passerby saw a man sitting outside of the boot village. According to this third eyewitness, he matched the description given by Jeff in the Fildower case and the late night customer in the bridal shop murders. The shop floor remained quiet for the next hour and a half. A few people walked in, saw that the place was empty, and so they left. However, one customer, concerned by the lack of staff, decided to investigate further, quietly making their way to the back of the unit. And just like that, it was at 2:30 p.m. as shoppers went about their daily errands just meters away that Nancy Kitzmiller's body was found. She'd been shot in the head. At first glance, investigators treated this as a robbery gone wrong. Due to the hallmark attack, they believed that the two cases could be connected. But the theory of theft was promptly ruled out, as no cash had been taken from the register and Nancy's valuables and purse were left behind. Once again, detectives were made aware of the eerily similar I-70 killings, and it wasn't too long before a solid connection was made. Now, at this particular point, this guy seemed like a ghost, and police were just chasing him up and down the I-70, praying to God that he didn't hurt anyone else. The fact that his target had been a man had also thrown off investigators, but now by returning to his previous MO and choosing to strike at a retail park just minutes away from the I-70 highway, this unknown suspect had told those working on the case two things. One, his crimes were 100% emotionally driven, and his violent fantasies probably stemmed from a failed relationship with a petite, pretty brunette. And two, he was most definitely from the area because he always made sure he had access to the I-70 throughout his killing spree. Even if you look at this Google Maps image of the crime scene locations, it literally draws a straight line from Indianapolis to St. Charles, Missouri. The walls were finally starting to close in on the notorious killer who terrorized the Midwest for far too long. Employers ensured that all females were working alongside male employees and that those on staff were on high alert for the scruffy man with the dull red hair. Police hoped that with increasing media coverage, someone would recognise the sketch created using eyewitness statements and that soon they'd come forward and put a stop to this 4-week reign of terror. But despite their exhaustive hard work and several nights spent away from their families, their efforts would be in vain, and once again the I-70 killer would darken the doorstep of another innocent retailer. The store of many colours in Raytown, Missouri was celebrating its third week of trade. The small business, co-owned by 6 young friends, specialised in holistic health remedies and tools for spiritual well-being. 37-year-old wife and proud stepmother of 2 boys, Sarah Lynn Blessing, was thrilled to be working alongside her close pals. She was passionate about alternative medicine, and for the first time in forever, she was able to walk into work with a smile on her face. Sarah was at an exciting crossroads in her life, and this new venture was something that her partner, Sonny, supported wholeheartedly. Big animal lovers, the couple also shared 2 pets, a cat and a dog, and Sarah treated them like her babies. She was such a giving and caring person, a natural healer, her friends said. In fact, she made a point of visiting her friend Karen Winnie, who was quite ill at the time, each week. And of course, the morning of Thursday the 7th of May was no different. After enjoying a breakfast of fresh fruit, she fed her dog and cat and left for Karen's at around 10 AM. A couple of hours later, she arrived at the holistic health store for her afternoon shift. At 2 PM, business had slowed a bit, so Sarah picked up the phone to have a chat with husband Sonny. Sonny would later say that their conversation was normal. They spoke about the shop and the possibility of making some weekend plans. He said that Sarah gave no indication that anything was wrong. The store of many colours was based within the Woodson Village shopping centre, and busy footfall meant that Sonny never really worried about his wife working there alone. He could never have guessed that a deranged serial killer was surveying the small retail park looking for a brunette female working all by herself. Just after 6:30 PM, Tim Hickman, who worked at the Video Attic store, heard loud pops coming from Sarah's shop next door. As someone who was familiar with firearms, he recognised the sound as a gunshot and grabbed his own weapon to go and investigate. He saw a man in a grey sports coat disappear swiftly around the corner, but when he called out for Sarah, he was met with a cold silence. Keeping his hand on his weapon at all times, Tim cautiously made his way to the back of the little shop, where he eventually found Sarah Lynn Blessing laying lifeless in a pool of her own blood. When police arrive at the grisly scene, Tim, a cashier from a supermarket, and the owner of an antique store claim to have all seen the same man loitering around the retail park that day. Tim then made a startling confession to officers that would haunt his family for years to come. Earlier on in the afternoon, Tim's mother and sister had been working at the video shop. In fact, he'd only arrived at 5 PM to relieve them so that they could go home. An hour later, at 6:15 PM, the shooter appeared in the doorway of the video attic, but he looked confused. This man, later identified as the I-70 killer, looked Tim in his eye and started shaking his head angrily before leaving the scene. At the time, Tim couldn't make sense of the strange interaction, but after reading about the previous victims in the local newspaper, everything started to fall into place. Because who had been working at the front of the store just an hour before? Tim's sister, a petite and pretty young brunette. The descriptions provided and the presence of that all too familiar jeweler's rouge tied Sarah's murder to the 4 other attacks. As hard as they tried, investigators failed to track down the elusive maniac. A special task force was even created, recruiting decorated members of the FBI and law enforcement, but their efforts were fruitless. Citizens living in and around the Midwest waited on bated breath, wondering when the I-70 killer would once again lash out at another unassuming woman. Headlines at the time caused panic and fear amongst the masses, and the fact that police had no solid leads didn't help matters. Just as the leads stopped coming in, the I-70 killer appeared to be taking a little hiatus himself. As quickly as he started, he'd stopped, leading investigators to believe that he'd either been arrested or he was perhaps dead. In the early 90s, DNA analysis was hardly cutting edge, and although physical evidence was found on a veil at the La Bride d'Elegance crime scene, it would be more than 6 years before state prisons would be required to collect DNA from convicted felons. It's entirely possible that this guy was incarcerated in 1992 and then released long before ever having to provide a DNA sample. Many believe that the I-70 killer didn't stop and that he's responsible for a string of unsolved murders in the early 90s. Over the course of 5 months, 3 women were gunned down whilst working alone. The victims, 22-year-old Amy Vess, 51-year-old Mary Ann Thacker Glasscock, and 35-year-old Vicky Webb, were all shot in the back of the head. Much like that of the I-70 killings, only small amounts of cash were taken from the register and the attacks happened during the day. However, unlike in any of his previous crimes, the shooter made an error. He left store owner Vicky Webb for dead, but due to a medical anomaly and a little bit of luck, she lived to tell her tale. Thanks to an abnormally thick spinal column, the bullet that struck the owner of the alternative gift shop was unable to travel any further into her flesh. Laying on the ground, she slowed her breathing in an attempt to trick her attacker into thinking that she was indeed dead. Much to her terror, he returned and stood over her, this time aiming the barrel at her forehead. This was it. Her day had started out so positively, and now Vicky's life was over. Vicky was meant to be heading off on a vacation with her family the next day, something they'd been looking forward to for months. In that quiet moment, she thought of her 13-year-old daughter and how she would miss out on so many things that a mum shouldn't have to miss out on. Eyes still closed, she looked back on her life and tried to hold in the sobs that rose in her throat, when all of a sudden she heard a loud click. The gun had jammed. From above, she heard a deep, dry chuckle and then footsteps. The gunman was leaving. Luckily, emergency services were called by a passerby who just happened to be in the store shopping for a gift for a friend. Quickly, Vicky realised her injuries were far more severe than she'd initially thought, as she couldn't move her arms or legs. Vicky Webb wouldn't make her flight to Paradise the next afternoon, but she would learn to walk again, and now she would live to see her daughter get married. Although there was undeniable similarities between the cases, there was also some striking differences. In the I-70 shootings, the man appeared to be all about the killing. He'd go in, bang bang, and then he'd leave. Whereas in Vicky's case, she said her assailant was friendly and chatty, even leaving the store to come back later that day. She also remarked that he seemed very nervous, asking questions about customer footfall in the area, and he was constantly looking out of the window as if afraid someone would walk by. Hardly the behaviours you'd expect from a seasoned serial offender. Still to this day, all of the crimes remain unsolved, and if we're ever going to see resolution in any of these cases, time is of the essence now more than ever. So often in these situations where there's more than 1 or 2 victims, certain names get lost in the shuffle. Names like Patricia Smith and Patricia Majors, as there is so little out there about them. We see this time and time again in the true crime community, where serial killers are glamorized and sadly their victims are reduced to a tragic little byline in the local paper. These women and Michael were good, honest, hard-working working people, each with their own story to tell, essentially sitting ducks for a wild predator who pulled the trigger first and asked questions later. He didn't care that they had families, husbands making pasta at home for dinner, children expecting to see them around the tree that year at Christmas, daughters hoping that their wisdom would get them through the tough years of adolescence. He didn't care. But we should. People must know who this guy is, and some may even be aware of what he did back in the 90s. Take a long, hard look at this composite sketch. Does he look familiar? The search for the I-70 killer will never be over. Not for the families who lost someone that spring. He is described as a Caucasian male with strawberry blonde or light red hair. In 1992, he was clean shaven but may have since grown a beard to hide his identity. He has droopy eyes, thin lips and a large forehead. He's familiar with the Indianapolis area and would have probably stayed somewhere near the I-70 in the early 90s. Due to the killer's victim profile, profilers believe he may have been acting out feelings of revenge for someone he dated or was married to in the past. He may have been with this person, probably a petite, slim, white brunette female in her 20s to early 30s at the time. This person was also able to travel from one city to the other within short periods of time without arousing suspicion. He was probably working as a truck driver or a travelling salesman at the time of the murders. Several serial murderers such as Herb Baumeister and Harry Edward Greenwell have been considered as suspects in this cold case. However, their MOs are very different and Midwestern police have since ruled them out. As someone who worked in many retail stores, often on my own, I naively never gave a second thought to how exposed I was to outside dangers. At any given time, someone can walk through those glass doors and change your life and the lives of those around you forever. Many a late night I pottered about the shop floor, not once realising that anyone who strolled by had a front row seat to my comings and goings. All it took was the wrong person to notice that I was there all alone. Since the events of 2020, many retailers have been forced to make substantial budget cuts. This means that many female employees are often left working all by themselves. If you ever feel unsafe in your working environment, please speak up, because remember, the I-70 killer is still on the loose. I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up for me. It really helps this wee channel of mine. If by some chance you're watching from the Midwest and you think, that sketch looks awfully familiar, then please contact Crime Stoppers using the number in the description box below. Are you watching for the first time? I promise the accent does get easier to understand. Please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Next time I see you, I will be officially a missus, so please remember I love you all so much. Lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and never turn your back on a dodgy customer. See ya! Going to the chapel and we go. Well, not quite, because we're actually getting married in a castle. Mwah!